Discover the amazing transformation of the 75-year-old grandma, a touching journey of overcoming. Helen sat in her kitchen, staring into the depths of her newly emptied life. The house echoed with silence, heavy and thick, as if the walls themselves mourned the absence of her husband, Ellis, who had passed only months before after more than 50 years together. She felt lost, a shadow of her former self, consumed by a grief that seemed insurmountable. How could she reclaim a life that felt as though it had been swept away by a tide of loss? As she rummaged through the attic, a chore meant to ease her mind, her fingers brushed against a dusty box, one she couldn't recall seeing before. The latch creaked open, revealing stacks of letters tied together with frayed ribbon. They were love letters, penned by her grandmother, Clara. To Helen's astonishment, these letters spoke of a life hidden beneath layers of domesticity, a life devoted to creating murals that adorned schools and community centers, even if no one remembered them now. An artist. Her grandmother was an artist. A spark ignited within her, a passion for painting that had long been buried beneath household duties and family obligations flickered back to life. But as Helen stood at the precipice of her emerging identity, an unsettling turbulence gripped her. Community members, vibrant and youthful, brushed past her in the coffee shop, their chatter laced with condescension whenever they discussed real artists. Did they even see her? Up until now, she had been a reliable figure, a retired teacher, a friend, a neighbor. No one looked to her for inspiration or creativity, least of all herself. Doubts collided in her mind. Could a 75-year-old woman step back into a world that thrived on youth and ambition? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Tension coiled within her as she began to pour her heart onto the canvas. Nights became long and fraught with uncertainty as she battled against self-doubt. Would they laugh? Would they praise her efforts only to dismiss them as quaint and outdated? Helplessness clawed at her core as she grappled with these fears. The world outside her door felt divided, youthful energy poised against her deep-rooted experiences. Each brushstroke was both liberating and paralyzing. Could a mural born of loss and rediscovery truly stand against the flood of younger artists clamoring for attention? Just when her confidence began to take root, news of a local gallery competition for young artists reached her ears. Heart racing, Helen envisioned the murmurs that would follow if she dared to enter. Would she be met with pity or ridicule instead of respect? The weight of the town's skepticism pressed upon her, narrowing her vision to a point of absolute fear. Should she step forward with her mural, a testament of transformation and resilience, or retreat back to her faded memories? The clock ticked ominously, counting down the days until the unveiling, pressing her further into the quicksand of doubt and dread. As the internal war raged, Helen stood on the brink of a decision that could redefine her identity, leaving readers anxious for what the next chapter would hold. The weight of indecision clung to Helen like a shroud, yet something within her stirred a soft whisper urging her to confront the shadows of her doubt. By day, she continued working on her mural, each stroke of paint on the expansive canvas acting as both a release and an echo of her grief. The vibrant colors contrasted starkly with the sorrow she often felt, and yet, there was an undeniable beauty in that contradiction. This was no mere pastime, it transformed into an exploration of her past, present, and future. In the quiet corners of her mind, Helen mulled over the community's perception. Were they so caught up in their youthful ambitions that they would overlook the wisdom and experiences she carried? She could almost hear their dismissive remarks, "Oh, isn't that sweet? A little project for Grandma." It fueled a fire within her, kindling resentment against the stereotypes associated with aging. Enough was enough. This mural would not only reflect her past but also serve as a declaration of her existence and assertion that creativity knows no age. Just as she resolved to take the plunge, a surge of reflection swept over her. The letters from her grandmother lay sprawled across the dining table, words filled with longing and encouragement that felt like a lifeline across generations. Clara had faced societal constraints too, yet she triumphed, claiming her space in the art world through tenacity and vision. Could Helen follow in her footsteps? With renewed spirit, Helen sought the counsel of an old acquaintance, Lydia, a retired art instructor with whom she had sparked a friendship long ago. A leisurely lunch in Lydia's sunlit kitchen turned into an invigorating discussion about dreams, aspirations, and the fears that stifled them. Lydia's eyes sparkled with a warmth that inflected her assertions with sincerity. Art doesn't close its doors to anyone, Helen. You've got decades of life experience, let that infuse your work. Show them who you are. The conversation reignited a fire within Helen, yet she remained aware of the weight that came with a decision. The following days found her oscillating between excitement and trepidation. She crafted her mural with increasing zeal, each edition symbolizing a layer of her evolving identity. But the looming competition hovered in her shadow, a persistent reminder of her fears that continued to gnaw at her resolve. Compelled by her desire for self-affirmation, Helen strategized her approach. She thought about how she would present her mural, where she could share the story behind it: her late husband, her grandmother's legacy, her own journey of rediscovery. It was more than an entry, it was a testament to the infinite cycle of creativity, inherited and refined. As the competition drew nearer, the anticipation grew overwhelming. In a moment of clarity, Helen recognized the heartbeat of her art: vulnerability. She had lived a tapestry full of complexity, and her mural would embody every thread, joy interlaced with sorrow. She began to cultivate resilience, leaning into the knowledge that her truth was worth expressing, irrespective of the outcome. On the day of submission, Helen stood before the mural, awash in a mix of pride and fear. Confronting herself in that moment, she uttered a silent vow to embrace whatever followed. She would no longer be defined by her age or by the criticisms that lurked within the community's judgment. Life, she realized, was not merely about recognition but about the act of creating itself. As she mounted her mural on the gallery wall, the bustling ambience of the competition wrapped around her. The first whispers of the crowd reached her ears, fragmented but charged with energy. Would they see her? Would they judge? The time had come for Helen to face her fears and discover if her voice could resonate amid a sea of youthful ambition. As the buzz intensified, a sudden voice cut through the chatter, drawing her attention toward the emerging figures mounting a challenge against her work. Is that really supposed to be art? The skepticism echoed in her mind. And Helen felt the familiar tremors of anxiety rise anew. The moment had indeed arrived. The voice that pierced through Helen's thoughts hung heavily in the air, thick as the paint she had slathered onto her mural. A group of younger onlookers snickered among themselves, their laughter kicking her insecurities into high gear. She'd hoped to capture their attention, but instead, she felt like a relic on display, not as an artist, but as a curiosity. The fear she had worked so hard to suppress clawed its way back up, wrapping her thoughts in tendrils of self-doubt. For a moment, she hesitated, contemplating the possibility of retreating, of stepping away from the chaos that threatened to engulf her. Yet, as she stood there surrounded by lively voices and youthful energy, the vibrant blues and reds of her mural swirled in her memory. It wasn't merely paint on a wall, it was where her heart and soul mingled, the voices of heritage echoing in each stroke. Infused with her grandmother's spirit and her late husband's love, this canvas told a story she had fought to craft. Do you love it? She whispered to herself, feeling a swell of defiance rising within. Those colors weren't just pretty hues, they were symbols of her battle, her journey of reclamation. The realization ignited a flicker of adrenaline, and she acknowledged that the scorn didn't matter, the only thing that mattered was her truth. Searching the gallery, Helen spotted Lydia across the room, her familiar face a beacon amidst the sea of youth. In that moment, feeling buoyed by a whisper of solidarity, she summoned the courage to embrace her decision and confront the skepticism head-on. If art could challenge the status quo, why not her? Her hands were trembling but steady as she approached the gathering crowd, heart pounding like a drum. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice quaking slightly yet resolute. The attention shifted, and for a brief moment, the snickers quieted down. "Hello, everyone. My name is Helen," she began, her gaze sweeping over the faces before her, a mixture of curiosity and dismissal. "What I've created here is not just art, it's a culmination of decades, a tapestry of love, loss, and growth. Each brushstroke carries a story from my life, as rich and complex as any you might create at a much younger age." A few expressions softened, and she pressed on. "My grandmother, Clara, taught me courage through her own art. She faced adversity, and so do we all, regardless of age. This mural is my declaration that we can find beauty in vulnerability, regardless of how many years we've lived. I may be older, but trust me when I say that the vibrance of life doesn't fade, it transforms." Helen noticed a flicker of recognition in some eyes, a kind of communion she had longed for. Perhaps her voice was resonating after all. As she spoke, she felt a surge of empowerment course through her veins, each sentence replacing doubt with resolve. Her story was just as relevant now as it ever had been, infused with experiences that could teach lessons of resilience to anyone, regardless of age. Gradually, expressions in the crowd began to shift from skepticism to contemplation. She witnessed softening eyes that seemed to glimpse the deeper message behind her mural. Was it possible that her narrative was not just her own but a shared one, an inclusive motif that anyone could embrace? As she finished her impromptu speech, Helen felt lighter, like the burdens of others' judgments were starting to dissipate. The murmurs of the crowd echoed in her mind, filling the air with a tantalizing sense of acceptance. But just as hope bloomed within her, her gaze landed on one individual still shaking their head, their arms crossed defiantly. "Are you sure you belong here?" the young man challenged, his tone patronizing. That question hung ominously in the air, a new wave of doubt crashing over her like a cool winter wind. Her heart raced, and for an instant, Helen felt prepared to retreat once more, but something in her capacity to confront this moment halted her breath. Did she belong? The answer unfolded in the depths of her soul, intertwining with the vibrant colors of her mural, beckoning her to stand firm. "The moment I create, I belong," Helen answered, the words spilling forth with newfound conviction. And as she held her ground, her heart surged with anticipation. How far was she willing to go to prove her worth, to assert her identity amidst the storm of youthful expectations? With adrenaline rushing through her veins, she faced him fully, ready to uncover the answer to the challenge lying ahead. What awaited her might just define not only her artistic journey but her very identity. A confrontation that tested the limits of her resolve was now in play. The real question loomed: could this moment become the catalyst for her ultimate transformation? As the tension escalated, Helen felt a flicker of heat creeping into her cheeks. The young man's smirk was a sharp reminder of how quickly confidence could evaporate. But instead of allowing the familiar tide of self-doubt to drown her, another realization took root. This was not just about acceptance, it was about defiance, about claiming space for herself. "What if I do belong?" she challenged, voice strong, each word a brick building a wall against her insecurities. "What if you are learning from me instead? My experiences add depth to this art. Can you truly say your youth lends you wisdom?" A subtle gasp echoed through the crowd, and she could feel her pulse amplifying her resolve. His expression faltered, momentarily caught off guard. Encouraged, Helen leaned into the moment. She did not need an adoring audience, she craved acknowledgement of her struggle and mastery. It was time to show how the brush strokes of her life had forged not only her art but her very spirit. Around her, the murmurs grew softer, more introspective. Faces previously consumed by amusement were now contemplating her words, their expressions morphing, if only slightly. It was the start of a powerful shift, a burgeoning rapport that Helen eagerly grasped. She could see the walls melting in the eyes of some and altering their stance towards her. Desperation flickered to determination in her gut. She would not only defend her place, she would demand respect for it. Art does not belong to the young alone. It's about the narrative, the struggle to find a voice amidst a cacophony of judgment. Each layer I painted onto that wall is a chapter of my life, and they deserve to be shared, just as yours do. Yet, doubt clawed at her once again, questioning whether she was being too confrontational. Was she risking alienating herself from the very audience she sought to inspire? A thread of apprehension pulled at her as she considered the possibility that her words could evoke further ridicule. But confronted with the choice of silence or assertion, Helen felt the weight of her experiences tip the scale toward courage. Suddenly, the young man scoffed. "You mean to tell me that your struggles somehow relate to mine? You're just an old woman clinging to the past. Why should we care?" The crowd seemed to hold its collective breath, Helen's heart racing like a roller coaster on a steep descent. Did he believe her life was less worthy of recognition? This was a direct challenge, one that left no room for retreat. As the air around grew thick with tension, she felt an ember of inspiration flare into a flame. How often do you think the world listens to the stories of those it labels as obsolete? She asked, her tone softer now but charged with intensity. Life can seem like a race, but while you're sprinting, you might miss the beauty of the journey. I carry wisdom gained through loss, triumph, and love. I invite you to listen, to see every color in my mural as an invitation to know part of your own identity. In the audacious silence that followed, Helen felt a swell of vulnerability mixed with a shimmering kind of power. She was challenging not only him but also herself to delve deeper into her artistic expression and her unique place in the world. This wasn't merely about defending her art, it was about redefining what it meant to empower oneself, regardless of age. As murmurs began to rise in the crowd again, she felt a resolve solidifying within her. What once had felt like a weight was now a grounding force, compelling her to push harder against the echoes of doubt. Perhaps we all belong in this space more than we realize, she concluded, heart full of indomitable spirit. Perhaps we're tied together by our stories, despite age, despite differences. A bizarre stillness hung in the air as she stepped back, daring to search the faces that surrounded her. A mixture of uncertainty and curiosity ebbed and flowed among them, igniting a spark and opportunity to engage with her truth and their perceptions. Yet, the young man remained unmoved, the flicker of defiance in his gaze unyielding. "What happens next, Helen? Are you ready for what comes if we start to listen?" he pressed. The moment bore uncertainty wrapped in an electric intensity, and Helen felt a thrill at the thought of where this could lead. Facing not only him but every youthful critique head-on would weave an intricate path ahead, one that could transform them all. Could she finally unveil not just the depths of her art, but also the more significant journey of self-discovery that awaited? The answer now loomed larger than before, tantalizingly within reach. The air charged with anticipation, Helen felt her heartbeat quicken as unfamiliar courage enveloped her. The challenge posed by the young man, brimming with skepticism, ignited a fire in her. She could sense the weight of the crowd's gaze, their eyes demanding her next move. It wasn't just about defending her position, it was a moment of self-realization, a chance to emerge stronger not from conventional acknowledgement but from a deeper understanding of her worth. What if this moment marked the beginning of something profound? She took a deep breath, summoning all the richness of her past into her voice. Listening and understanding require humility, not just authority. Those of us labeled obsolete have stories that resonate in ways the young may not grasp yet. Art is the bridge between generations. Your youthful fire needs the warmth of my experience. With every word, she felt layers of inhibition peel away. This was no longer a mere defense, it was a declaration. The potential within her was not just in her skills but in the very fabric of who she was, an amalgamation of struggles, losses, triumphs, and transformations. She envisioned herself walking through her life's timeline, guiding them along each pivotal moment that had taught her to wield a paintbrush like a sword. Glancing across the faces of her audience, Helen noticed a shift. The initial skepticism was subtly transforming, replaced by introspection. She could see reflections of their own stories in her courageous stance, a glimmer of resonance that might stir their hearts. Could this be the key to their connection? Realizing she had a larger mission than simply showcasing her art, Helen pondered the idea of using her experiences as a vehicle for empowerment. Her mind raced with thoughts on how to effectively communicate her journey. There was still so much to share. Her past was a mosaic, each piece of hurt and joy contributing to a more vibrant picture, a tapestry of resilience that could illuminate their paths. Yet amid her creative surge, doubt persisted, hovering on the edge of her consciousness. The young man's challenge gnawed at her, an echo that lingered. What would it take to turn these whispers of criticism into applause? Was she ready to engage deeper, not just with this boy but with the notion that age should not define her contribution? Determined, she stepped forward, redesigning the stakes of interaction. What if we made this dialogue ours, a fusion of experiences? Imagine what art we could create together, your energy combined with my perspective. Can we not see possibility instead of conflict? Let us make room for divergence to spark innovation. Yet the young man remained rigid, unyielding. You talk of inclusion, but your truth feels like a barricade. What makes you think I should care about your journey? His response stung, but Helen refused to crumble. It was in this tension that clarity emerged. Because everyone's journey is valuable. It's not about age, it's about authenticity and connection. I'm more than my years, I am a conduit of knowledge that could enrich your vision. We might realize that together, we create a more expansive art form. The crowd inhaled sharply, caught between admiration and apprehension. Helen seized the moment. She had to compel them to visualize a world where age was not a limitation but a unique thread woven into the artistic experience. As dialogue began to bubble within the crowd, Helen felt anticipation mount. Could this discourse ignite a fire in someone else as it had within her? Could she unveil a shared creative synergy that transcended personal beliefs and insecurities? Her journey had commenced, but the path ahead remained fraught with uncertainty. Almost instinctively, she reached into her bag and withdrew a small canvas, the surface still unmarked. Shall we create this story together, a tribute to what we can learn from each other? This is the beginning of our collaboration. With that, she placed the blank canvas in front of the young man, eyes alight with possibility. The moment felt electrifying, yet fragile, balanced on the cusp of transformation. He stared at the canvas, then back at her, a flicker of contemplation dancing across his features. What happens if I refuse? He retorted, a hint of defiance still present. Then this canvas remains blank, Helen replied, eyebrows raised, challenging both him and herself. It's up to us to decide whether we embrace this moment or let it fade away. What is our choice? What lay ahead was intertwined with the threads of their destinies, and Helen could feel the weight of their expectations. The canvas awaited their brushstrokes. Would this be a moment of collaboration, or would it highlight an irreconcilable gulf between them? The possibilities were endless, yet the stakes had never been so high. The silence that enveloped them felt monumental, heavy with implications. Helen's heart pounded, her boldness collided with the weight of uncertainty. As the young man's gaze remained locked on the canvas, Helen's mind raced, turning over her own resistance to rejection. What if he chose to dismiss her entirely? In that moment, she understood something crucial: her worth was not dependent on the young man's acceptance. It was rooted in her journey, her experiences that had shaped her, regardless of his perspective. What he didn't realize was that art had always thrived on conflict. So many of her best works had stemmed from debates, the clash of ideas, emotions forged into something tangible. Helen, she thought, as if just speaking her name would bolster her resolve, this is your moment. Art doesn't wait for permission, she urged, voice steady despite the storm of doubt. It's about seizing the moment, improvisation, and the exploration of ideas. If you choose to turn away, then that is your loss. But just imagine what could be birthed from this canvas if we each relinquished the need to be right. The young man's brow furrowed, caught between defiance and curiosity. Maybe he saw something or someone different in her now. Just maybe. Why should I care what you have to say? He shot back, the edge veiling uncertainty. You're asking me to engage with your past, which is irrelevant to my present. Helen could feel the sting of his words, but instead of crumbling, she leaned into the emotional intensity of the confrontation. That is precisely it. I'm asking you to understand that you have the power to transform the present. I am not merely a relic, I am a person who lived through an era of change. My past is laced with experiences that could inspire us to rethink what is possible. The murmur swept through the crowd like a rolling tide. Some were nodding, while others remained skeptical, still tethered to their preconceived notions. Helen took a step closer to the young man, her voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper. Let us not linger in this stale argument. Let us paint a new narrative, born from collaboration. What burdens your heart today? What truths do you hold that can reshape this canvas? The young man's glance shifted, the confrontation flickering like a candle in the wind. He hesitated, vulnerability creeping upon him, the slick sheen of bravado beginning to fade. Uncertainty mingled with interest in his eyes, as if the invitation to share his truth bore a deeper weight than he realized. Why do you care so much? He asked, a flicker of genuine curiosity piercing the armor of his defiance. Because I believe in the beauty of connection. In seeing how our stories intermingle and create something entirely unique, a branch of understanding that extends beyond our individual perspectives. Every painted stroke is a fragment of a larger dialogue, an evolution waiting to happen. In her heart, she felt a swell of hope. This engagement was not merely an attempt at a youthful exchange, it was a revelation. A realization that she was not alone in confronting the complexities of this moment. With every passing second, she secretly wished for him to resonate with this idea. You're right, he said, that defensive shield in his gaze softening. I probably don't see the connections to my world. But I've never tried. As if guided by a mysterious force, Helen leaned over the blank canvas and lifted a brush, extending it toward him. Then try with me. Let us mark it together. A heavy silence settled as he looked from the brush to Helen. Tentatively, he accepted the brush, color pulling at his fingertips. Helen felt an array of emotions surge within her: anticipation, anxiety, exhilaration, the bittersweet knowledge of vulnerability. What if we end up creating something terrible? He muttered, eyeing the canvas skeptically. Then we will have created something new together, Helen replied, her tone infused with a sense of daring. That, in itself, is worth it. As she watched him contemplate his next move, her heart raced. This unique moment teetered on the edge of transformation. What would their artistic experiment reveal? What barriers would they break to reshape their understanding of collaboration and creativity? The brush hovered over the canvas, the weight of the moment palpable. What choices would shape the first line? And in that silence, enriched with potential, Helen realized she had ignited a renegotiation not just in her relationship with the young man but with the very essence of her artistry. The true artistry of transformation began not just on the canvas but within themselves. Would the engagement yield a vibrant spectacle of collaboration, or would it collapse into doubt? The outcome was still held in tender balance, the journey unfolding like a fresh canvas could evolve. The brush trembled in the young man's hand, hovering above the canvas like a secret waiting to be unleashed. Helen's gaze was steady, fixed not on the potential disaster of a muddled painting but on the promise of connection, of growth, of something new. With every moment that passed, she felt her heart racing not just for the artistic endeavor they were about to embark on, but for the deeper exchange of ideas, hope, and vulnerability that lay within their shared exploration. Hesitation is often the first enemy of creation, she mused quietly, echoing her sentiment not just about art but about life itself. She couldn't help but recognize that having this conversation with him felt almost primal, an instinctive battle against the fear of rejection they both faced. Just like we can't pave a road without breaking the earth, we can't create without confronting our insecurities. Just let it flow, she encouraged, sensing the tension radiating from him. Let the brush do the talking. You don't need to fight against your thoughts, just express them. What is the worst that could happen? His eyes shifted to her, uncertainty intertwining with dawning realization. I don't know if I can create anything worthwhile. That is the point, she replied, a hint of mischief in her voice. It isn't about whether it's worthwhile or not. It's about the act of creating, about the journey we undertake together. Her words ignited a flicker of rebellion within him. He finally brought the brush down, drawing a hesitant line across the canvas. The color pooled and spread, a vivid blue, rich with emotion. Helen felt that pulse of courage rise within her as she followed suit, adding sweeping strokes of gold symbolic of opportunity, of warmth. They painted alongside each other, a push and pull, a dialogue without words. With each brush stroke, Helen recognized a shift in her own consciousness. It became less about producing a masterpiece and more about what these colors, birthed from her impulses and his, could represent. Transformation wasn't just about the final product, it was in the very act of sitting side by side, letting go of past rigidity. As the canvas bloomed before them, the vibrant colors began to merge, creating shades that neither had anticipated. See? She prompted gently, sensing the walls he had constructed slowly crumbling. This is what happens when we allow our pasts to blend together. Our fears can transform into something beautiful. He glanced up at her, eyes wide as he began to see connection through the chaotic mix of color. This feels, he faltered, as if searching for the right word, liberating. Exactly, she affirmed, beaming with the light of shared victory. The liberation of expression. It's intoxicating. Suddenly, undercurrents of tension surged again. Would the serenity of creation bring forth conflict further along in their painting? The young man's gaze flickered towards the spectators, some nodding thoughtfully, others staring with skepticism. We can't backtrack now, Helen reminded him, nurturing the flare of resilience within him. Our journey is just beginning. Let's just keep going and see what emerges. The beauty is in the spontaneity. A look of determination crossed his face as he dipped his brush once more into the colors, abandoning his trepidation to embark on this adventure of collaboration. As they painted, the exchanges flowed more freely, evolving into conversations that explored not just their views on art, but the stories of their lives. Helen unknowingly shared pieces of her experience, the places she'd been disappointed, the colors she'd sought throughout her artistic journey, as he revealed the weight of expectations he'd held, and the shadows of doubt that continually loomed. Why did you start painting? He asked, curiosity now driving his inquiry. To escape, and later, to connect. Each canvas is a new world, she answered, mindful of her past choices shaping her present. For me, it became more than just strokes of paint. It was a lifeline. They began to form a rhythm, creating waves of color that ebbed and flowed, reflecting inner dialogues that were mending under the tender brush of understanding. It clicked in both of them. This was growth. This was connection. And yet, beneath their enthusiasm lurked an unspoken threat. Helen felt it a gnawing question about the inevitable outcome of this moment. Would their newfound alliance endure as they engaged everything they had within to explore deeper themes brought forth in this endeavor? Before they could speculate further, the young man suddenly halted, a flash of defiance crossing his features. The thing is, I don't know how far we should take this. Helen interjected, matching his intensity. I think that is what it ultimately comes down to. The paintbrush hovered again, their thoughts intertwined with the fluttering shadows of possibility. As a quiet tension resettled around them, Helen prepared for what lay ahead, knowing that with connection comes conflict and with understanding comes the challenge of facing each other as realities. Would they be willing to face the deeper truths of their collaboration as they stepped further into unknown waters? With a flick of the wrist, the brush dipped, heralding an unsettling yet promising evolution into the next phase of their encounter. What truths will they unearth within themselves as they continue this creative journey, now fueled by a battle of aspirations and insecurities? The answer loomed just beyond the horizon of their canvas. The young man's brush swirled through vibrant hues, each stroke growing bolder as the fear of failure receded like a tide. The canvas transformed into a battlefield of color, each vivid splash a reflection of unspoken emotions. Helen watched intently, captivated by the blossoming confidence before her. They had crossed the threshold, but the way forward remained cloaked in uncertainty, and yet there was an exhilarating freedom painting over the hesitations. What if I don't like what I've created? He asked suddenly, pausing as he glanced at his work, skepticism flickering anew in his eyes. Helen paused too, considering his words. What if it's not about whether we like it? Art is a living thing, it grows, it evolves. Just like us, she replied, her voice steady, echoing the lessons she had learned through her own artistic pursuits. He absorbed her words, tracing the contours of his swirling colors with a newfound interest. I guess I never thought of art that way. I always saw it as a final destination. That's exactly where the struggle lies for so many of us. We focus on outcomes, forgetting the joy of the journey, Helen said, her tone inviting him into deeper reflection, an appeal to his sense of exploration, not just in art but in life. As the conversation unfolded, she saw him wrestle with a newfound understanding. The struggles he had lived with began to seep through the strokes on the canvas. The easel became an unintentional mirror, reflecting back layers of himself he had yet to confront. Each color was more than pigment, it sang of lost opportunities, doubts, dreams unfulfilled. Sometimes, I think I am just pretending to create, he confessed, hesitating as if fearing exposure. I've spent most of my life trying to fit into molds others have crafted for me. I never felt like my own person. I understand that feeling, Helen replied gently, revealing pieces of her own past, revealing herself as more than just a mentor. I too felt chain-bound by others' expectations. It led me to abandon my voice until I discovered art, a way to reclaim what was mine. He nodded, a flicker of recognition igniting his gaze. He was beginning to unearth truths about himself that had been buried under expectations. With each brushstroke, it was as if he was charting a new course, shedding layers of doubt and fear. Maybe it's about creating for the sake of creation, he murmured, almost to himself. The notion hung in the air, an invitation to consider a new approach to his identity. Yes. Embrace that thought. The beauty lies not in perfection, but in the expression of your truth, Helen encouraged, the warmth of her belief enveloping him. But doubt crept back into the edges of that newfound acceptance like a shadow. What if my truth is ugly? What if I'm not talented enough to paint it? His voice trembled, fear tightening around the words like a noose. Then let it be ugly, she countered firmly, staring him down as if to break through the last defenses he had erected. Let the paint reveal every shade of truth you've been hiding. That's where the power lies. The young man grabbed his brush again, hesitating momentarily before plunging it into a dark, moody hue. Intent surged through him, he was channeling every insecurity, every doubt, and slinging them onto the canvas. Helen's heart raced as she anticipated this leap. She could sense a confrontation between his past and the man he was becoming. Would he fall back into despair? Would he embrace this pivotal moment? As the brush danced across the canvas, something began to shift. The dark hues morphed into a wild cacophony of emotions as he layered colors, applying aggression, joy, pain, and light. She could feel the tension transform into a pulse of creation, rhythmic and raw. With each stroke, the uncertainty began to unravel, exposing not just a clearer image on the canvas but perhaps the contour of him ready to emerge anew. As he stepped back to survey what lay before him, silence enveloped them. The young man's breath caught a cocktail of awe and apprehension twisted in his expression. Clearly grappling with something profound. "Do you see?" she whispered, caught in the charged atmosphere, their hearts synchronized in collective anticipation. "You're onto something startling there." But the truth of that moment was like a double-edged sword. Would he embrace the depths of both triumphs and failures? The path ahead was not just an artistic exploration but a navigational journey through the labyrinth of his identity. He turned to her, eyes wide as he faced a critical decision. Is this truly me? Can I accept this? With those words hung thick in the air, a new horizon stretched before them, pulsating with questions that looked deep into their souls, demanding exploration. It was just the beginning, but would they venture beyond the canvas, into the mire of authentic selves waiting to be revealed? And just like that, as the colors began to drip and merge in unholy alliances, the weight of uncharted territory loomed large. What awaited them both at the heart of such authenticity could either set them free or pull them apart. What truth might emerge when shadows meet the light? The silence hung heavy between them, a palpable tension that seemed to swallow the room whole. The young man, still grappling with the layers of his emerging identity, felt the weight of his own introspection crashing upon him like waves. Helen's gaze bore into him, urging him to dive deep into the unknown waters of his essence. Am I ready to confront this? He questioned quietly, the uncertainty lingering like smoke in his chest. Doubt crept stealthily back, whispering insidious thoughts that entangled his mind. You are not required to have the answers right now, Helen offered gently, her tone softening the sharp edges of his fear. That is the beauty of creation, it gives you room to explore. Her encouragement sparked a flicker of resolve within him, igniting the embers of possibility that had begun to smolder beneath the surface. Every stroke on the canvas became a conversation not necessarily aimed at an audience, but a dialogue with himself. Yet, as he stepped deeper into reflection, a new anxiety flickered to life. It spread like wildfire, igniting a panic that caught him off guard. What if I create something that is truly awful? What if I unveil the ugly parts of myself? His voice was barely above a whisper, a truth he had been too afraid to voice, hitting closer to home than any previous fear. Then it's a part of you, Helen replied, the strength in her voice grounding him. Accepting those parts is what gives you authenticity. Denying them only strengthens your doubt. Embrace them, and you'll find freedom. He hesitated, wrestling with the storm brewing in his mind, a tumultuous clash between the conditioning of never showing weakness and the equally powerful need to be seen for who he truly was. The brush felt heavy in his hand, a tool of liberation teetering on the brink of his next decision. What would emerge if he finally surrendered to the messy chaos of his own truth? Filling his lungs with one shaky breath, he dipped the brush into the deepest, darkest color on his palette. The black hue mirrored the deepest parts of his psyche, embodying layers of grief, disappointment, and lost dreams. As he began to apply the paint, something within him uncoiled. Each stroke became an exorcism, one that freed not just chaos but old desires, untold stories, and suppressed hopes. The shapes that emerged were raw. They were jagged and undefined, much like the fears that held him captive. It was both daunting and liberating. Helen watched, her heart swelling with pride as he confronted the canvas with ruthless honesty. It didn't matter if the outcome was good or bad, it mattered only that he dared to venture into the spaces he had long avoided. "Keep going," she encouraged, her voice intricate in weaving between the ebbs and flows of his emotional journey. With each stroke, the young man's eyes began to shine with an inner light, one that had been buried for far too long. He became aware that this process wasn't just about creating art, it was about dismantling the frameworks that had defined him. He could see the colors blending, brightening as the shadows started to lift. His fear was not extinguished but reframed, now residing beside his budding confidence. "I can feel it," he breathed out, a mix of disbelief and realization. "I can actually feel it." "Yes, that is the essence of you breaking free," Helen answered, the resonance of her voice urging him on, becoming part of the symphony of creation unfolding around them. But even as he moved closer to his own revelations, the specter of his past loomed large, casting shadows over his blossoming clarity. Would he turn back? Would he allow himself to be renewed, or would he retreat to the confines of safety? The battle within him was not yet over. He stood at a precipice, each color vibrating with promise, each question stirring deeper within. As he stepped back once more to reclaim perspective, his heart raced. Questions arose that were sharper, more urgent than before. What happens when I face the parts of myself I've tried to ignore? Am I strong enough to embrace all my colors, even the ones that make me uncomfortable? The canvas, now alive with chaotic beauty, hung before him like a double-edged sword, beckoning him forth but poised to cut deep. In this moment, a revelation loomed. Perhaps failure was not the threat he'd always believed it to be, but rather a necessary passage to the truth of who he was meant to be. The tension coiled in the air shifted, transforming yet again. What would happen if he stepped further into this exploration, allowing himself to encounter both the light and the dark within? Would the paint hold up under the weight of his truth? In that charged silence, the path ahead felt both inviting and fraught with uncertainty. A decision had to be made, one that could shift everything he thought he knew. Would he reach out for his most authentic creation, or would his fear still hold dominion over him? The frightening question echoed in hearts unmoored. With choices lingering on the edge of his courage, he readied himself for the next bold stroke that would shape the rest of his journey. The tumult still raged within him, yet a flicker of determination ignited his spirit. It was time to expose the heart of his art and indeed, the heart of himself. With a deep breath, the young man released the brush, positioning it over the canvas. The hesitance that had restrained him was slowly being replaced with an encouraging hope. Helen sensed the shift in energy. It felt electric, as though the air crackled with uncharted possibilities. He pushed aside his fears, acknowledging the rawness of his artistic expression. This was his moment. "Just paint, without thinking," Helen urged, her voice steady and confident, recalling her own struggles amidst self-doubt. "Allow each stroke to speak your truth." And he did. The brush lashed out, flicking specks of color that danced across the canvas in a chaotic yet harmonious ballet. Each stroke was infused with urgency, a pulsating reflection of myriad emotions reflecting both fear and hope. They were all parts of him, the vibrant hues of exhilaration and the darker shades of doubt seamlessly marrying on the canvas. As the colors swirled and blended, he felt a sensation of liberation wash over him. "This feels authentic," she interjected, her heart swelling with pride as she witnessed his transformation. "Embrace it. This is who you are," stripped of expectation. Each layer is a part of your journey, a testament to your resilience. Each brush stroke fortified his burgeoning confidence, and the internal battle for acceptance began to dissolve. The young man took a step back, absorbing the vivid creation before him. The mural morphed into a powerful representation of his growing self-awareness. The youthful ambition he feared had melted into a vibrant tapestry that told his story. "I can't believe I did this," he said, or threading through his voice. This canvas, a fusion of his story and Helen's guidance, was a living testament to their courageous encounters. The murky shadows of his earlier doubts slowly evaporated, exposed by the brilliance of creativity. "What you created is more than just art," Helen nodded, her eyes gleaming with recognition and respect. "This mural encapsulates vulnerability, transforming fear into beauty. You chose to share your truth, and that is immeasurable strength." At that moment, the gallery humbled into silence, each passerby drawn into the vibrant explosion of colors that radiated from their creation. For the first time, the young man understood his place in the artistic world. No longer a mere observer, he had stepped into the role of creator, courageous enough to embrace the multiple facets of his own identity. Then, the audience's murmurs ignited again. Words of admiration rippled through the crowd. "This it resonates," one voice exclaimed, drawing others in. "I see the struggle. The colors tell a story." Helen felt a swell of pride as she watched the young man's eyes widen in disbelief, the scattered seeds of doubt replanting themselves as confidence took root. At that moment, he had conquered more than just the canvas, he had confronted the skepticism that lived within him. Suddenly, her own personal journey unfolded before her, a silent testament to the decades of unpredictability and transformation. Helen's once dim spark illuminated with recognition, she too had rediscovered herself through art. "This mural is not just yours," Helen said, a soft smile curling at the corners of her lips. "It embodies our shared journey together, the bridge between our age and experiences." He turned to her, realization flooding his mind. "We challenged each other, didn't we? Through this process, I've grown. I've reshaped how I perceive myself," he admitted, clarity replacing the uncertainty in his voice. As they both stood back to observe their creation, Helen's heart raced with an exhilarating sense of accomplishment. Their collaboration was not merely confined to the canvas, it had transformed the very essence of how they saw themselves and their role in the world. Helen had done it. She had reclaimed her artistry, redefining the boundaries that had previously constrained her spirit. In that gallery, their mural bristled with potential, becoming a visual testament that defied age-based limitations, proving that creativity has no expiration. The colors that danced across the canvas now encapsulated the vibrancy of life itself, not just a singular experience, but an acceptance of all that each individual holds within. At last, Helen felt the weight of her grief settle into acceptance as she embraced her grandmother's legacy. Art transcended the walls she had once felt. Imprisoned by the despair she'd nearly drowned under, gave way to fulfillment. As the audience erupted in applause, Helen stood tall, embodying not just pride but acknowledgement of her remarkable transformation. She had ventured into those shadows and emerged as the artist she always was. Not just an artist again, but a sage weaving threads of overcoming into a colorful tapestry, ready to inspire both generations. "Your truth isn't just yours. It opens doors for those to follow," she whispered to him, solidifying their bond and recognizing their shared achievement. He nodded, understanding deeply now. "Thank you for believing in me through my uncertainty." With that, they exchanged a brief but powerful embrace, sealing a partnership born of struggle, artistry, and, ultimately, triumph. In that moment, Helen established her place as a guiding light for others, while the young man stepped further into his evolution, a testament that age and experience shaped them, but never defined them. Their story, in its layered vibrance, would continue to ripple outward, challenging others to embrace their narratives, to paint their truths, and to step boldly into their own journeys of overcoming. Now is the moment you step forward. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and support more tales of transformation. Comment your reactions and theories about this incredible ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness this remarkable journey of overcoming. Don't wait even one more second to show your support. True fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of uplifting the narrative together.